What's the best era of motorsport movies? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the ATYL Media channel, where we're doing motorsports media your way. And in this video, we're diving into some of the most iconic moments in motorsports history on the big screen. That's right, today we're talking about motorsports movies to figure out what is the best era of motorsports films, the good, the bad, and the funny, from classics like Grand Prix to parodies like Talladega Nights, and modern-day masterpieces like Grand Turismo, at least in this gal's opinion. We're gonna dive into the best of the best motorsports movies in 4 distinct eras over the few decades to determine which era is the best. And to do this, I'm gonna need some help. So Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. And every type of film sort of has its own starting point, a godfather of the genre, if you will. But one film in particular laid the groundwork for all the others that would come after it in this era, known for its grounded and gritty takes on the world of motorsports. The Realism Era focused on the authenticity and seriousness of racing in a way that often felt documentary-like in nature, and the most notable of these films truly kick-started racing movies as we know it, the 1966 Oscar-winning Grand Prix. John Frankenheimer's fictional take on the 1966 Formula One season defined what would later become movies like Driven, Rush, and one of my personal favorites, Ford versus Ferrari, and it's easy to see why. The cinematography alone was a feat never seen before, and one director, John Frankenheimer, pushed to the absolute limit. Frankenheimer visited cinematographer John Stevens with a crazy idea when producing this film: filming cars in a car at over 180 miles an hour for his action-packed racing sequences, something that hadn't been done before. Now, Stevens was known at the time for filming in a lot of unique locations and developing unique ways of doing so. And using his expertise, Stevens developed the first entirely remote-controlled camera capable of being attached to a car and panning and tilting at those high speeds that Frankenheimer was looking for. The rest is history. The film received nominations in 4 categories at the 1967 Oscars, winning in 3 of those, including Best Editing, Best Sound Design, and Best Effects for Sound. And the world of racing movies was forever changed. Not too long after the 1966 classic, one particular actor, famous for his work behind the wheel, took his steps into a major motion picture with one of the biggest races in the world. McQueen is here, and no, I'm not talking about lightning. Steve McQueen stars in the 1971 film based around the biggest race in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. This film is nearly as pure about racing as it gets, and mainly because Steve McQueen actually wanted it that way. Le Mans was shot entirely during the 1970 running of the race, with some additional scenes shot on site, including camera cars, much like those used in Grand Prix. But this film is so much different. The plot is entirely grounded in its setting. It's a car race that is meant to be won. No real character drama, no major conflicts or dialogue, just 90 minutes of gasoline-fueled adrenaline and Steve McQueen. McQueen's star power no doubt carries this film, but the racing sequences reminiscent of those brought to the screen by Grand Prix are honestly a true highlight. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to see McQueen do his own driving during the race itself, as his planned entry that he had for the 1970 running of Le Mans was denied.
This isn't just a 1,000 to 1 shot. This is a professional blood sport.
Now, so far, Grand Prix and Le Mans have showcased this era of realism, but as the genre progressed, Hollywood began to take a little more initiative in the storytelling of these motorsports films, and what better place to do that than right here at home?
I'm gonna give you an engine, low to the ground, extra big oil pans will cut the wind from underneath you.
Tom Cruise and race cars. What more could you need in the 1990s? This 1990 film follows the traditional formula we've grown accustomed to with racing movies. A young, hotshot driver gets his chance, but is just slightly in over his head. A scary crash sidelines him, causes him to rethink his career. Girl he runs into catches his attention, etc., etc. You know the drill. But there's a magical aura to this film that still stands today. The movie's ability to showcase NASCAR's grittiness makes it feel like a time capsule to America's most popular motorsport. And on top of that, Days of Thunder keeps its serious tone, showcasing what it means to live a life on the edge of control in a cutthroat sport that wasn't afraid to leave you behind.
Drive my car. What are you talking about? Daytona.
Cruise's brooding rivalry and on-screen chemistry with Michael Rooker, alongside Robert Duvall's iconic performance as crew chief Harry Hogan, brings you into this world of NASCAR in a way that makes you feel like you're a part of the team. Cole Trickle's emotional journey makes him easy to root for. Plus, it taught us all that sometimes you have to learn things the hard way.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
On top of that, we may be getting a long-awaited sequel to Days of Thunder, as Jeff Gordon says Tom Cruise is looking to kickstart production. Now, the Realism Era took us into the driver's seat, giving moviegoers a true, gritty feel of the dangers and the thrills in the world of motorsports. But Days of Thunder, though gritty and grounded like its predecessors Grand Prix and Le Mans, kind of marked a subtle turn that would become the next 2 decades of heavy-handed Hollywood racing movies.
When you think about racing movies, that stretch from the early 2000s to 2008 is kind of wild. It wasn't about realism or honoring the sanctity of motorsport. It was about vibes. The engines were loud, plots were chaotic, and racing was less of a subject and more of a setting. This era gives us heart, parody, nostalgia, and some of the most quotable lines in motorsports pop culture, and we call it the Hollywood era. Let's start with 2 movies. I'm not going to focus on too much, but still deserve a mention when we're talking about this era. First up is Driven. It was made in 2001. This was Sylvester Stallone's attempt at making a serious open-wheel racing drama, and okay, listen, it had potential, but it feels like a PS2 cutscene that someone accidentally made into a feature-length movie. There's a scene where they race through city streets in open-wheel cars, no helmets, in traffic, and don't even get me started on the infamous coin under the tire test. It was dramatic, expensive, and deeply unrealistic, which is maybe why it flopped in the box office and boasts a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then, on the other end of the decade, we get Speed Racer in 2008, and honestly, it was ahead of its time. It took a 1960s anime and turned it into this hyper-stylized neon dream sequence of a movie. It flopped hard when it came out, but over time it's become a cult favorite for just how committed it is to being itself. It's not trying to be real racing, it's trying to feel like Saturday morning cartoons, and in that sense, it kinda rules. What makes Speed Racer so special is that it's an absolutely unserious movie that takes itself incredibly seriously. And somehow that combination just works. Nowhere is that clearer than in the final race. It's electric, it's emotional, it's this explosive payoff to everything the film builds toward. The visuals go hard, the score swells, and you can't help but get chills. It's not just a win for speed, it's a win for the heart of the movie. Pure over-the-top triumph. Okay, let's talk about Cars. Yes, the Pixar one, and yes, I'm totally serious when I say it's one of the best tributes to motorsports ever made.
At first, it's a kids movie about talking cars, but dig a little deeper and it's a tribute to racing history and to the small town Americana that shaped it. Pixar did real research at NASCAR tracks and even took road trips down Route 66 to capture that fading roadside culture. Lightning McQueen starts off as this cocky, all-about-his-image rookie, and through a detour in Radiator Springs, he reconnects with the soul of racing. His mentor, Doc Hudson, isn't just voiced by Paul Newman, who's a legendary actor and a real-life racer, but he's modeled after a real car that dominated in the early days of NASCAR. The movie is packed with racing cameos. You have Richard Petty as the King, Dale Jr., Mario Andretti, even Michael Schumacher shows up as a Ferrari, which is wild. Michael Schumacher and Mater, aka Larry the Cable Guy, in the same movie? Iconic. But what makes Cars special is that it cares. It treats racing with a quiet reverence. Sure, the cars talk and some tractors may or may not tip over, but beneath the animation is a message about legacy, community, and what we risk losing in the name of progress. It's a movie that made millions of kids want to learn more about racing, and also made a few of us cry over a Hudson point. And on literally the complete opposite side of the spectrum, we have Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, released in the same year as Cars, and somehow they're two sides of the same coin. Where Cars is all heart, Talladega Nights is all ego, and it works. Will Ferrell plays Ricky Bobby, a NASCAR driver who only knows one thing: winning. His whole identity is built around going fast, having sponsors on everything, and trash talking anyone who gets in his way. Thing is, even while it's ridiculous, like putting a giant Big Newton sticker on the windshield level ridiculous, the movie gets NASCAR. It was filmed at real tracks like Charlotte Motor Speedway. There are cameos from Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jamie McMurray, Mike Joy. Even the sponsor logos feel just real enough to fool you. It's completely absurd and mocks the over-the-top stereotypes that define the sport. Talladega Nights gave us "if you ain't first, you last." It gave us "shake and bake." It gave us baby Jesus prayers, and to this day, even drivers still quote it. It's a parody that hit too close to home in the best way. So what does this era tell us about motorsports on screen? It tells us that from 2000 to 2008, racing movies weren't trying to be documentaries. They were trying to entertain, to make you laugh, make you cry, and maybe sell a little bit of merch, but honestly to make you feel something about racing. Driven tried to be serious and failed. Speed Racer went full Technicolor and found love years later. But Cars and Talladega Nights, one gave us heart and the other gave us chaos. And both left a lasting impression on how a generation sees racing, whether they realize it or not. Now we have to do a complete 180 from the vibes that the Hollywood era took to the realistic approach of the Prestige era.
Unlike the lighthearted and comedic tone of the films in the Hollywood era with their over-the-top storytelling and parodies, the Prestige era marks a return to realism in motorsport, so no more of whatever this is.
This makes us all realize the kind of pressure these drivers are under.
Instead, realistic and gritty biopics started to emerge, and films from the years 2010 to 2019 finally treated motorsport with the seriousness it deserved. Let's start from the beginning. Take the 2010 documentary Senna, for example. Not only do many consider Senna to be the best motorsports documentary ever, but the greatest documentary of all time. This movie beautifully depicts the life and career of Brazilian F1 champion Ayrton Senna, from his F1 debut in 1984 to his fatal accident in 1994. Whether you're learning about Senna for the first time or you're a lifelong F1 fanatic, the film captures who he was so beautifully that by the time you reach the final 10 minutes and hear the line,
"Ayrton ran out of luck,"
your heart drops. You truly feel the weight of his legacy and the agony of that loss.
Era ídolo pra mim. Ele representava muito o Brasil. O brasileiro precisa de comida, educação e saúde, pouco de alegria. Alegria foi.
The film closes with footage of Senna's wreck, along with the narration that he had no broken bones, no bruising, and that if a piece of assembly would have gone 6 inches higher or lower, he would have walked back to the paddock. It feels so unfair. Those words, intercut with a montage of his greatest moments in the morning of his loss, stay with you. This entire film stays with you and leaves a lasting impact. And that impact was shown in the reviews for this movie, making it incredibly clear how effective a serious and realistic motorsport documentary could be received by an audience, as well as how Senna itself set the bar for how stories of motorsports could be told going forward. A bar that the 2013 film Rush might have hit and actually exceeded. Directed by Ron Howard, Rush tells the real story of F1 drivers James Hunt, played by Chris Hemsworth, and Niki Lauda, played by Daniel Bruhl, and their rivalry during the 1976 F1 season. Now, a trend you're going to start to notice starting in this era is that the script writing is very character-driven, so you're not just focusing on the on-track action anymore. Nothing just completely revolves around that at this point. You're really focusing on these characters and knowing them on a more personal level. Rush, along with other motorsports films going forward, dive into the psychological and personal battles the drivers, their families, and their teams face off track. You even get more technical with the world of racing too, from the business side to the cars themselves. Add in some incredible cinematography, and you've got a recipe for gold, like the movie Rush. A majority of moviegoers share the same overwhelming positive sentiment about Rush, with the movie scoring an impressive 88% on Rotten Tomatoes and a solid 74 on Metacritic, reflecting its strong critical reception despite what some might call a slightly disappointing box office performance, earning only $91.5 million worldwide against a $38 million budget. Now, when you compare that to the over $500 million that F1 the movie brought in this summer at the box office, you understand why I put only in front of Rush's $91.5 million that it brought in at the box office back in 2013. But there are some reasons as to why that could have been. First up, F1 did not have the same worldwide popularity that it had back then, of course, with Drive to Survive and other things that have pushed Formula One into pop culture recently. You're going to see that there is a comparable difference to its popularity back in 2013 to where it is today. The second thing, and the most notable thing here, is that when you look at the other movies that came out in 2013 in September when this movie came out, it had some steep competition, like Insidious Chapter 2 and Prisoners. Now, these movies might not sound like they make a big impact on Rush's box office performance, but when you look at the stats, you can see what movies audiences were flocking to during that month, and it wasn't Rush. Also, add in Rush's limited marketing efforts, and you don't have a full recipe for success there. But despite all that, Rush is still considered one of the best motorsports movies of all time, widely loved by its audience, setting the standard for what motorsport movies can do when given a realistic and deeply human touch. And this leads us to the end of the Prestige era in 2019 with the movie Ford vs. Ferrari. Now, unlike the other movies ahead of this one in the Prestige era that dealt with some heavier topics and had much darker tones, Ford vs. Ferrari was kind of a breath of fresh air. It was a little lighter in tone, had some comedy, and even with that, it dealt with some pretty serious and heavy topics, especially at the end. This movie highlighted Ford and Ferrari's rivalry going into and during the 1966 24 Hours of Le Mans. The defining characteristic of this movie to me is its Hollywood-esque stylization. Speaking of Hollywood, how much more Hollywood can you get with the movie starring Matt Damon as Carroll Shelby and Christian Bale as Ken Miles? What stood out to me about this film wasn't just the stunning cinematography, but the grounded script. While most true stories get over-dramatized for the big screen, and this one definitely does to an extent, this one still felt really grounded in real with its lighter approach.
Wally, darling?
Yes, love?
Look at a fizzy pop, please.
And like I said, even with its lighter approach, it still dealt with really heavy moments and heavy topics. You could feel the anxiety of Ken Miles' son watching his dad survive a fiery crash during testing and the stress of Ken Miles' wife for his safety. You could feel the frustration of Carroll Shelby dealing with Ford's indecision of their program. You felt every part of this movie, even with its lighter tone. This script was so deeply focused on these characters, their personal struggles, their battles, their growth, that the fight against Ferrari almost felt secondary in this script, but I wasn't mad about it because when we focused on the characters more, the battle at Le Mans means more. And then when you get to know these characters more, the end of the film is another gut punch. I also appreciated how the writing of the script really met its audience where they were at, not talking over them, not talking down to them, but really taking them along the journey from the process of the business side of the sport to the technical aspects of the sport, It made it more engaging. But at the end of the day, like all movies do in this era, it brings you back to the reality of racing, the reality of the risks these drivers, these families, these teams take, the competition of racing, the reality of that, the humanity of racing, and of course, the heart of racing. A trend that would carry forward to the modern era. Take it away, Jess.
Thanks, Taylor. Well, if the Prestige era gave motorsport movies a new sense of realism and emotional depth, the modern era has taken that foundation and kicked it into high gear. Motorsport movies from 2020 to now focus on balancing heart with horsepower, telling high-stakes, character-driven stories that put you inside the helmet, in the garage, and into the pressure cooker lives of the people who make the sport what it is. It's a shift that's redefined the way racing is told on screen, and before I dive into the films themselves, I have to talk about the one thing that's fueled it all more than anything else: Netflix's Drive to Survive. When the docuseries debuted in 2019, it pulled back the curtain on Formula One, and the world watched. Its reality TV-style format made the sport feel more accessible and piqued the interest of new and especially younger fans. Suddenly, team principal Gunther Steiner's blunt yet fiery personality made him a fan favorite, and Daniel Ricciardo's charm and grit made him the sport's unofficial hype man. Drive to Survive proves something major. You don't have to know strategy or tire compounds to fall in love with racing. And that surge of interest opened the door for filmmakers to create motorsport stories aimed at wider, more diverse, and truly global audiences. Stories that go beyond technical details to focus on the human drama at the heart of racing. If Drive to Survive brought fans behind the scenes, Gran Turismo spotted a whole new kind of racer. With sim racing exploding during the pandemic, the idea of gamers becoming real-life drivers didn't feel so far-fetched anymore. So when Gran Turismo hit theaters in 2023, its timing was perfect. The film tells the true story of Jan Mardenborough, a teenager whose skills in the racing video game Gran Turismo earned him a real-life shot at becoming a professional driver. And it's not just a feel-good Hollywood film. Mardenborough went on to race at Le Mans and in elite racing series all around the world. What makes Gran Turismo stand out from earlier motorsports films isn't speed or legacy, it's the message that anyone from anywhere can belong on the world's biggest racing stage. And in a sport where most drivers start in karting before they can even drive on the road, Gran Turismo highlights that the traditional path isn't always the only path, and that passion and skill can come from less conventional beginnings, including a PlayStation. Released just 4 months after Gran Turismo, Ferrari takes the modern era's character-driven approach in a very different direction. Instead of a light-hearted underdog story, it zeroes in on Enzo Ferrari during one of the most pivotal years of his life, the late 1950s. When personal tragedy, strained relationships, and a crumbling business all threatened to undo him. In many ways, the film plays like a prequel to Ford v Ferrari, but where that movie reveled in the spectacle of racing, Ferrari simply treats it as the setting. The danger in the cars are still there, but the lens stays firmly on the man behind the badge. Rather than glamorizing racing, the film uses the roar of the engines to explore the personal sacrifices and emotional battles behind the iconic brand. In doing so, Ferrari captures what so many modern-era motorsport movies do best: put people before the machines. Much like Rush brought the golden age of F1 to life, F1 the movie brings today's grid roaring onto the big screen, but with blockbuster scale. Released this summer, the film follows Sonny Hayes, a once promising F1 driver whose career was nearly ended by a devastating crash. Years later, he returns to the sport, rediscovering his purpose and proving that second chances matter. While the racing scenes are some of the film's biggest highlights, the story never gets bogged down by technical rules, keeping it accessible for casual viewers. But behind the scenes, this film had some serious horsepower. We had director Joseph Kosinski, who directed Top Gun Maverick, 7-time F1 world champion Lewis Hamilton, who served as a producer, and how could I forget the leading man himself, Brad Pitt. Filmed during real Grand Prix race weekends, with actual teams and cars, the film generated massive buzz for months before release and went on to gross over $550 million worldwide, the highest of Brad Pitt's career. Though the film was a hit, the story isn't really centered on victories. It's about trust, resilience, and determination that define life both on and off the track. If earlier eras celebrated legends or spectacle, the modern era makes motorsport personal, inviting anyone, anywhere to feel part of it. It's authentic, emotional, and connected, proving that racing stories today aren't just about speed, but about the people who make it matter.
From the realism era to the modern day era, it is so fascinating to see how motorsports movies have transformed over time. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. And what's your favorite motorsport movie of all time? Let us know in the comments below. A special thank you to Ryan, Laurel, Jessica, and Elise for helping out with this video. And of course, for more content from us here at ATYL Media, make sure to go to abovetheyellowline.com. Thanks so much, and until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.